Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Optics in Action, where we've got an amazing leader today as a guest. We've got Daniel Brown. He's an executive leader, and he helps organizations with creating dramatic results and dramatic growth results. So, Daniel, I'm excited to have you on this episode today. Looking forward to a great discussion about why, what, and how you create value and sharing that with our audience. So, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Brian. I appreciate it.
I'm excited to have you. I've known you for a few years now, although we have some common history that goes way back, and we probably won't get into all the details of that. But we've known each other for several years now, and I think your stories of being an executive who's helping in a wide variety of industries in paperboard and packaging and technology. You've got some great stories to share and yeah, with our audience. So well, I like to start a little bit with the why. Like, why do you get so excited about dramatic growth and being an executive leader and being a leader of team? Why do you do the things that you do?
Great question. That's the kind of thing that I think we figure out over time. But I would say by my nature, I love to create new outcomes. And so I'm very much forward thinking. That's what I like to do, create something new. But I also have a strategy background that provides the path to get there. So that's where I've always been. As a professional, ever since I got out of college, I would say the thing that has put all of that on steroids is a love for impacting people. And I would say that's something that I've grown into as I've matured over time. Early on, it was just all about the results. I love creating results. And over time, I realized, wow, I'm impacting people. And oh, by the way, when I'm engaged in helping the people, you get even, your results multiply.
Yeah.
So it's a, multiplier effect. So that's kind of it. And so,
Yeah, no, I love that answer, and I think I look back on my career, and I think very early on it was all results and metrics, and those things are important. Like I don't think I don't think we want to like minimize them to the extent that results don't matter. Clearly, we have to have profit and we have to have cash flow in order to accomplish the things we want to do. But that impact of being a leader and impacting others, the purpose, I think, that you were communicating there, that purpose drives us to grow, and it gives it some bigger meaning than just hitting a metric for the sake of hitting a metric.
yeah, and I'll build on that briefly. One of the most important things I've seen, because I've seen a number of different business scenarios where there's a pure opportunity for growth, and then in other situations, it's, more about a turnaround or coming out of a challenge. There's nothing that impacts people more positively than growth. When a team is working towards something better, some sort of improvement that they can get engaged in, wow. I mean, that's where you can not only create results, but you get people excited, they want to be there. And, as you know, in our current business world, I mean, having engaged employees, it's a multiplier effect, if not an exponential effect. So
Oh, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about that, because that is that's an area of passion for me as well, is the lack of employee engagement can really deteriorate the results of a business. It's not always easy for the finance people to make that direct connection. Is like employee engagement equals what ROI, but employee disengagement has been
mm.
a really big challenge, I think, for organizations over the past several years. So what are some of the things, or how do you go about engaging employees and getting employees really working together to accomplish something great?
Wow. Another, I hate to keep saying great question, but it can be so complex. My my mind wants to jump to one simple answer, which I'll get to. It's collaboration, right? It's engaging people. But I'm gonna pull back from that and I'm gonna start a little earlier. You got to build trust first. And if you don't have a foundation of trust, and there's a bunch of things that go into that as a leader, and that's both, leadership to employees, that's peer to peer, it's all over the place, but it's, number and again, there's a bunch of elements of that, but the number one thing is consistency, being a consistent individual that they see you doing the same things, they see you backing up your word. That's something they can buy into. Um, but once you have that trust, I'll give you an unconventional one. You have to allow a certain amount of conflict because ultimately you're trying to get to the I'm going to use a maybe a slightly different word. I learned it, probably 10, 15 years ago. Simple word, but has a lot of meaning to me, and that's enrollment. When you enroll somebody in, you're giving somebody the option of choosing. And once they choose, if they choose positively, if they choose to engage you, you've gotten so much more of their heart and their mind, versus when you tell somebody to do something. So enrolling somebody, so you have a foundation of trust, you enroll somebody and you allow a certain amount of conflict. I would call it creative conflict, because if you don't allow somebody to disagree, they don't have an opportunity to enroll. And so that's the starting formula. I could go, further, but to keep that short, man, once you enroll somebody, now you have their heart and mind. They're engaged in an outcome and the actions to achieve that outcome.
Yeah. I think that healthy conflict that you shared, I think it's uncomfortable sometimes. It's uncomfortable. It can be uncomfortable for people, but I've started really thinking about the relationships that we have in life that we genuinely care about and that genuinely create good outcomes. And I think we could talk about everything from our marriages to relationships with our children to anything, right? That the relationships that we care about in life and the things that we have a real vision and clarity and goals of achieving in life, we're willing to have healthy levels of conflict. Now, there's no doubt that sometimes that conflict can get unhealthy, but having healthy conflict with our spouse, with our children, with our parents, with our the conflict is a natural part of life. And when we genuinely love the people we're around and we have a common shared purpose, I think we find ways to manage that conflict to deliver a result. And so I love that you bring that up because true collaboration requires some level of conflict and some level of disagreement. If there's none of that, then you may have sort of a dictator and just minion sort of relationship, and that may not give you the results you want.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen papers and studies on that where you ended up there. At best, you're getting maybe 60% of somebody's capacity when you're telling them what to do. And of course, I'd say one of the key aspects of business is engaging more of that heart and mind. So you can take that up to, you're probably never going to get 100%. There's always going to be some level of distraction, but if you can take that up to 85, 90% by truly engaging people, wow, you're unleashing potential of an organization. And I love the way you articulated that in terms of that certain amount of healthy conflict or challenge. I mean, it's being willing to tell people in a respectful way, of course, because you're trying to engage them in a listening way. But when you can tell them the hard things, the things that others are reluctant to tell them, you're introducing an entire new set of possibilities for folks, whether that's a business idea, a CEO or a board does not want to hear about, or whether that's, I even think of employee conversations where you're having a performance review. If you don't give somebody the opportunity to address a challenge or an opportunity, well, you failed them. You're not caring about them. If you really want to engage them in a way where they can be more successful, you have to be willing to share those, harsh truths in a respectful way.
And respectful. Yeah, I really appreciate that. So as you think about I'm curious, right? Like, as you look at your past experiences, like in packaging and paperboard and technology, and across a wide range of experiences, what are some of the are there some things that you learned that you can share about the intersection of technology and people and process and how that delivered results or how that delivers results for people.
Ties right into sort of, if when I look back on my career, it ties right into what I've done. If going from an insight, what's going on in the industry, what's the opportunity we can seize. Your piece, what you just articulated, people and process, that's the middle piece for me. That's aligning an organization, to achieve an opportunity and then creating results. So very much the way I think about my skill set and my impact across my career. I'll give you, to address that directly, I'll give you two completely different scenarios where um, the intersection of people, process, and technology was critical to the results. One scenario in paper and packaging in my past, coming into a business that we thought had the potential to grow. I come from a strategy background, strategy consulting. What is the market opportunity? And you had a bunch of people trying to chase growth in a market where there was plenty of opportunities, but you had to, one, have product development folks that, know how to create things, want to create things. They like to experiment. You have a manufacturing organization, we're talking about a high continuous process environment, where they want to make products over and over. They don't want the introduction of a lot of changeovers. And I'll give it, all the way over to salespeople and then into the market. All those folks have different needs.
Yeah.
So the one thing that unites it all is creating a process, basic strategy process. How would you categorize market demand? What are the product categories? Well, what would our product look like? And so once you create this process and you document everything, you have an opportunity for alignment. So I'm kind of giving you a strategic or commercial excellence example of, once you create that documentation, the process, the pieces that come together, you have an opportunity for all these parties to align on something that makes sense for them, makes sense for manufacturing, makes sense for the scientist who wants to create the product, makes sense for the salespeople and the customer. But I'll give you a completely different scenario in technology services. So I'll kind of give you a scenario, but when I came in as COO of an organization in technology services, the dramatic opportunity, or one of the dramatic opportunities that was available, is we were enrolling new customers, but not signing up for ongoing service plans. So these service plans became the foundation for a SaaS program over time, but initially it was just a service program. We have an ongoing maintenance of service and support, but literally, at the time I came in over the last few years, somewhere between 50% and 2/3 of the new customers were falling off. They were not even being enrolled in new service plans. And so, and why was that? It was because the people were overwhelmed, chasing too many things, and there wasn't a detailed process that held it together and made sure the handoffs occurred. And so, the opportunity there was to create a process, create a handoff between one role and the next in a system where we could hold people accountable, and we got results. You create metrics, you measure it, you organize the folks, and you have a process to track that and to do the handoffs. Well, lo and behold, over the next approximately 24 months, we moved those enrollments up to over 75, of our installed base, from under 50% to over 75%. We doubled sales of current customers. So there's a number of outgrowths, but it's these handoffs between roles, different functions, that get overwhelmed, create leakage in your process. So
Yeah, those are
that
really,
helps.
really interesting that you bring that up. So this episode probably won't publish for a few weeks out, but the optics word of the week that I've been sharing this week is the word of focus. And I think this concept that you just shared really strikes me. The ability for people to focus on doing something that they need to do to move the ball forward. And we're kind of in the end of football season right now, but people need to be able to focus. If our team is not able to focus, they're not able to complete the tasks that they need to do. But we need to think about that, what you just described, this context of working across departments and across, with customers and onboarding customers and looking at, services and recurring services, all these things that need to happen for a system or an organization to function.
Mhm.
Each person within that organization needs to be able to focus on what they need to do for the system to work. And I think you also then shared those handoffs. So you got this system going along, you got a bunch of people that are working within that system, and having clear expectations of handoffs between the people and the processes. And so my next question was going to be, how do you make this link? Because I know you've got a lot of history and strategy and strategic planning and strategic, development, strategy development. And then there's this execution that has to happen, this coordination or symphony of kind of activities that need to happen. So how do you drive this strategic planning, strategy development to deploy into execution? What are some of your thoughts on that deployment, that sort of link between strategy and execution and how that needs to work?
Yeah, well, I'd say that's a relatively simple question. It comes down to what are you can use different words, but I'll use strategic initiatives. What are the handful, there's not a magic number, but there's a too many and there's a too few. Somewhere between, let's say, 4 to 8 strategic initiatives for an organization. Again, you don't want to make that too big so it dilutes the focus. But once you have those initiatives, they're key efforts. They involve usually multiple people across different functions. Then they can house project plans. You can have pick your metrics. I've used a number over the years, whether it's KPIs, OKRs, in the old days, balanced scorecards. There's any number of tools, but once you have the actions laid out that address these strategic initiatives and opportunities, and you have people accountable and you measure the results, one thing that's kind of like just on the edge of our conversation is, you know, people, I would describe it this way: people want to succeed. And
Mm.
if you give them the simple road map and the playing field, you kind of use the football analogy, what is the game we're playing? That's the
Yeah,
strategic initiative, or you might say it's the strategy, and then there's plays, and the plays within the game are the strategic initiatives. But either way, you have some structure for that. You have some definition. There's a rules, there's an objective. What are
yeah,
we trying to accomplish? We're trying to get to, at minimum, we're trying to get to the first down, or we're trying to score, ultimately trying to win the game.
yeah,
There's context and a set of rules. Well, that's for me what this alignment process, the focus is, because now you're engaging people, and they're not. I'll use a slightly different analogy. You don't want people sitting on the bus going along for the ride that's trying to get to some destination. You want people figuring out, all right, how can we make this thing go faster? How can we get farther, or in business,
yeah.
elevate results? That's where it gets fun, when the people aren't sitting on the bus for the ride. They're trying to figure out how to drive this thing faster, how to get the engine to push harder.
Yeah.
That's what's fun.
That's yeah. So some of what you just shared there. So I got outside of, so anybody who's watching on the camera right now will be able to see this, right? So I moved this out of the way earlier, right? But the thing that I've been talking about this week is is focus. And you can see I'm hanging up on the wall back. There's a magnifying glass, and I've got a telescope, right? And I think this is this sort of zoom out, like look at the moon, right? If for at the strategic level, you got to look at it from a very big picture, and you might use the telescope to think about that. And then you see up there on the wall the little magnifying glass. It's like, but each person, right, in order to make some discoveries about the moon, each person needs to have a magnifying glass to focus in on their part of the overall process. And so you can learn something about your system from both a telescope and a magnifying glass. You learn different things, but enabling the people at the right level in your organization to focus on the things that they need to focus on in order to be successful, I think is critical. I mean, if I'm here, I don't want to put too many words in your mouth, but that's what I heard and extracted from some of the things you just shared. Did I hear it in the right way, or was I
Yeah,
like way out in left field?
I'm kind of smiling here because I feel like you've been in more of my recent conversations than you have. But you just described the way I mean, for me, that what you just described, I'll call it, that's leadership, because someone who's able to pan out and see that broad picture, that opportunity, because ultimately what drives business, right, is demand. There's a need, and people have the opportunity to fulfill that need. But as you transition, I kind of built it into 3 steps. There's identifying opportunities, aligning organizations, and executing for results. Obviously, you can't stay wide and execute for results, and
Wait.
so
Tell me those 3 steps again. Those are
identify
really
opportunities,
identify opportunities,
align organizations,
align organizations,
and then execute for results.
execute for results. I love it. Well, I think I've shared with you a little bit about the optic system, the system that we're using with clients,
Yeah,
I think it follows those 3 things. We've got a 5-step process, but those 3 things are critical
yeah,
to that purpose, scope, and gaps that starts. Like, what's the purpose? Why are we doing this? What's our scope? What are the gaps that we know? Like, we have to identify those opportunities. Then we do this SIPOC and QVS, right? The little acronym things, but the concept is aligning, and then the action plan and job breakdowns that enable you to do those things. So yeah,
absolutely.
maybe we've been hanging out in each other's heads a lot the last few weeks.
But the interesting thing is that concept can be effective everywhere from high level strategy all the way through to the details of an operation of getting results. Whether I gave the example of enrolling customers after a system deployment, but any number of more transactional or executional items, but it applies at all levels.
Yeah.
But back to that focus, man, when you're going to, you start out like this, what are the opportunities? But if you're not putting a fine edge, I mean, we all know, like, there's a reason that a knife's edge is fairly thin, right? It's going to cut a little more sharply, or an arrow, you don't see blunt arrows. You see them with depending on the purpose, a very sharp tip, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what you need once you go to execution. You know what you're trying to accomplish. And hopefully you have a process and structure to accomplish it. And then you have the measurement, because that's what ties it all together.
Yeah, no, this has been a really outstanding discussion, Daniel. I sincerely appreciate that you made the time today to come on Optics in Action, to where we spotlight leaders with vision and clarity, folks like you who have this vision, who have clarity, who see and have a key process like that for really driving results and leadership as well. Like your care for people really came through. So how do people get a hold of you? How can people contact you if they're interested in learning more, connecting, and collaborating?
Sure. Probably the best way, Ryan, is just through LinkedIn. There's a lot of Dan Browns out there, by the way. My name, I go by Daniel Brown, but there's a lot of Dan Brown. So if you put Daniel Brown and one extra word, growth, you will definitely find me. You can Google that. You can go directly in LinkedIn, but Daniel Brown Growth, you will find me.
Fantastic. And we'll make sure to get that in the show notes and stuff when it gets published. So thank you again, Daniel, for being on Optics in Action today. And I'm sure our audience is going to learn a lot from just thinking through some of the things that you shared today. We
I
appreciate you being
appreciate it,
on.
Ryan. Love what you're doing. Glad to be a part of it.